The Arkham Enigma, Portals of Dread Unleashed. Horror Story. Scary Story. The town of Ravenshadow had always been a quiet and peaceful place, where the people lived in harmony with nature and each other. The town was founded by a group of settlers who had fled from the horrors of the Salem witch trials, seeking a refuge from the madness and persecution that had gripped the colonies. They had chosen a secluded spot in the Appalachian Mountains, where they hoped to find freedom and tranquility. For many years, the town prospered thanks to the fertile land and the abundant resources that the hills provided. The townspeople were devout and God-fearing, attending the small church that stood at the center of the town. They were also friendly and hospitable, welcoming any travelers or newcomers who passed by or settled in their midst. But everything changed when the Arkham family arrived. No one knew much about them, except that they had come from Europe and that they had a fortune that rivaled that of the richest nobles. They had bought the old mansion that stood on the highest hill overlooking the town. The mansion had been abandoned for decades, ever since the previous owner, a reclusive and eccentric scholar, had died under mysterious circumstances. Townspeople had avoided the place, believing it to be cursed or haunted. But the Arkhams seemed to have no such fears. They moved in with their servants and their belongings and began to renovate the mansion, adding new wings and towers that gave it a sinister and imposing appearance. They also erected a high wall around the estate, cutting off any view of the interior. They rarely ventured out of their domain, and when they did, they wore dark and elaborate clothes that contrasted with the simple and modest attire of the townsfolk. They spoke in a strange and foreign tongue, and their eyes had a cold and piercing gaze that made people uneasy. The townspeople tried to be polite and neighborly, but they soon sensed that the Arkhams wanted nothing to do with them. They declined any invitations to social events or church services, and they kept to themselves, shunning any contact or conversation. They seemed to have a disdain and contempt for the town and its inhabitants, as if they considered them to be beneath them. The townspeople began to resent and distrust the Arkhams, wondering what they were hiding behind their walls and what they were doing in their mansion. Rumors and speculations began to circulate, fueled by fear and curiosity. Some said that the Arkhams were nobles who had fled from the French Revolution and that they had brought with them a treasure of gold and jewels. Others said that they were spies or traitors working for a foreign power that sought to undermine the young republic. And some said that they were witches or warlocks, practicing dark and forbidden arts that defied God and nature. But no one dared to confront them or investigate them, for they feared the wrath and power that the Arkhams possessed. They also feared the strange and eerie things that began to happen in the town ever since the Arkhams had arrived. It started with small and subtle signs, such as animals acting strangely, crops failing, or weather changing abruptly. Then it escalated to more disturbing and alarming events, such as people falling ill, disappearing, or dying without any apparent cause or explanation. And then it culminated in terrifying and horrific manifestations, such as apparitions, poltergeists, and demonic possessions that defied all reason and logic. The townspeople were gripped by panic and dread as they felt that they were under siege by an invisible and malevolent force. They prayed and pleaded for God's mercy and protection, but they felt that their prayers went unanswered. They looked for a scapegoat or a culprit, and they found one in the Arkhams. They blamed them for bringing the curse and the evil upon the town, and they accused them of being the source and the master of the horrors that plagued them. But they did not know the truth. They did not know that the Arkhams were not the cause, but the catalyst of the events that unfolded in Ravenshadow. They did not know that the town had a dark and hidden history, that the land had a secret and ancient power, and that the mansion had a sinister and dreadful secret. They did not know that the Arkhams had awakened something that had been sleeping for centuries, something that had been waiting for the right moment to rise and claim its rightful domain. They did not know that the nightmare had only just begun. The Arkhams had come to Ravenshadow with a purpose. They were not ordinary people, but members of a secret and ancient order, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and power beyond the limits of the mundane world. They were seekers of the occult, the arcane, and the eldritch, exploring the mysteries and secrets that lurked in the shadows of reality. They had learned of Ravenshadow from an old and rare book written by the scholar who had lived in the mansion. The book contained a detailed account of the town's history, as well as a revelation of a hidden and forgotten truth. The book claimed that the town was built on a sacred and powerful site where the veil between the worlds was thin and where a portal to another dimension existed. The book also claimed that the portal was guarded by an ancient and primordial entity, a being of immense and incomprehensible power that the scholar had called the Raven King. The Arkhams were intrigued and fascinated by the book, and they decided to investigate the town and the portal. They believed that they could find a way to access the portal and to communicate with the Raven King. They hoped to gain his favor and his wisdom, and to learn the secrets of the cosmos that he possessed. They also hoped to harness his power and to use it for their own ends. They had prepared for their expedition, gathering the necessary tools and materials, as well as performing the required rituals and incantations. They had arrived in Ravenshadow and had taken residence in the mansion, where they had set up their laboratory and their altar. They had waited for the right time, when the stars and the moon were aligned, and when the portal was at its most active and accessible. They had chosen the night of the blood moon, when the lunar eclipse cast a crimson hue over the sky. They had gathered in the basement of the mansion, where they had found the entrance to the portal, hidden behind a secret door. They had opened the door and had stepped into the dark and narrow tunnel that led to the portal. They had carried with them a lantern, a book, and a dagger, as well as a cage that contained a raven, which they had captured from the woods. They had reached the end of the tunnel, where they had found a large and circular chamber, carved with strange and ancient symbols. In the center of the chamber, there was a stone pedestal on which there was a metal ring with wires and electrodes attached to it. The ring was connected to a generator, powered by a battery that the scholar had left behind. The ring was the device that activated the portal and that opened the gate to the other world. The Arkhams had placed the cage on the pedestal and had opened it, releasing the Raven. They had then turned on the generator and had watched as the ring emitted a bright and pulsing light, creating a vortex of energy in the air. The Raven had flown into the vortex and had disappeared, as if swallowed by the void. The Arkhams had waited for a few moments, and then they had heard a sound that chilled their blood and froze their souls. It was a sound that was not of this world, a sound that was beyond words and comprehension. It was a sound that was a mixture of a scream, a laugh, and a roar. A sound that echoed through the chamber and the tunnel, and that reached the ears of the townspeople, who trembled in fear and horror. The sound was the voice of the Raven King, and it was a voice that spoke of madness and chaos, of wrath and vengeance, of hunger and malice. It was a voice that said, "I am awake. I am free. I am coming." The Arkhams had realized their mistake too late. They had not opened a portal to a realm of wonder and enlightenment, but to a realm of terror and darkness. They had not summoned a benevolent and wise entity, but a malevolent and monstrous entity. They had not awakened a king, but a god. A god that had been imprisoned for eons by forces that had feared and opposed him. A god that had been forgotten and forsaken by the world that he had created and ruled. A god that had been betrayed and wounded by the beings that he had loved and nurtured. A god that had returned to reclaim his throne and his domain. A god that had returned to punish his enemies and his children. A god that had returned to destroy and devour. The Raven King had emerged from the portal in a form that defied description and imagination. He had a body that was a mass of feathers, claws, teeth, and eyes, a body that shifted and changed, a body that was both raven and human, and neither. He had a mind that was a storm of thoughts, emotions, and memories, a mind that transcended and transcended a mind that was both sane and insane, and neither. He had looked at the Arkhams, and he had recognized them. He had recognized them as his children, his descendants, his kin. He had recognized them as his traitors, his rebels, his foes. He had recognized them as his prey, his poise. He had reached out to them with his wings, his talons, his beak. He had reached out to them with his power, his will, his wrath. He had reached out to them, and he had torn them apart, body and soul. He had then left the chamber and had entered the tunnel. He had followed the tunnel and had reached the mansion. He had left the mansion and had entered the town. He had unleashed his fury and his hunger on everything and everyone that he encountered. He had ravaged and ravished. He had slaughtered and devoured. He had corrupted and consumed. He had turned the town into a hell, a nightmare, a wasteland. He had turned the town into Ravenshadow. Thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world of the unknown.